listen to the brush. And it really accelerates your entering a much more ancient Finnish system than our modern, industrial culture provides. I mean, getting back into the wilderness like that, having a grizzly bear in there, just within 3 or 4 days, something happens to me. I'm really like another animal almost. And it's a wonderful thing because everything externalized, and you live immediately in the present.
You were suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder before they had the name for it coming out of
I guess so.
What was it? What were you feeling?
For a number of years, I had really vivid flashbacks, and I thought I was the only guy out there, so I didn't pay much attention to them. Now it's interesting because Ed Abbey and I were friends from about the same time I got back from Vietnam. Before we had a name for this post-traumatic stuff, Ed pegged it really accurately in his fictional character Hayduke in the Monkey Wrench Gang. And I mean, you're hyper vigilant. You react to helicopters and loud explosions or backfires or whatever. I mean, and socially, you don't have much luck. Not many skills there.
What do you mean?
I just mean that paranoia is sort of a natural slice of life when you're feeling like that, and you're not comfortable being around people, and it's enough that these things I think do not change. I mean, the trauma of war. To have this experience and retain your humanity in war is sometimes you have to put it on hold because the soul can really take a mortal wound. It'll never recover from. And post-traumatic stress is not something you really get over. You never get over. It's just something you live with as best you can. And with me, the grizzly bears were so important because it allowed me to get out of myself and really recapture, I said, the elements of my own humanity, but it allowed me to love animals and other people, have children. I mean, to begin with, it was rough. The bear helped me so much in the recovery back to the point where I could at least function. I never wanted to re-enter a society that I never really approved of to begin with, so
What was your tie to the My Lai massacre?
Okay if I have a sip of water?
Yeah, please do.
That is my Day of the Dead, March 16th. And it's the anniversary of the My Lai massacre in 1968. It's also the day that I buried Ed Abbey out in the desert. So I tend to go out to his grave on my Day of the Dead. I was a medic in Quang Ngai province at a place called Bateau, which is a little, isolated Green Beret A camp, with about 10 Americans and 200 or 300 mercenary soldiers. That's how we operated. I built hospitals, trained nurses, so it was not just all war, but, though the war always got there. I was ordered out of the field because I'd kind of gone native. And they were right. I was no longer an American over there. I really wasn't. I didn't speak any English. I identified with the people. I love the people. I love the land too. But anyway, the helicopter sent to pick me up to take me out of the country flew over My Lai while it was going on. My Lai was like only about 35, 40 miles from my A camp, even though you never got there because it was like, we called it Indian country, but it was enemy country in between. And actually someone shot at our helicopter, which is no big deal. They did all the time, but that was from My Lai. And of course, I didn't know this until a year later when the Life magazine pictures came out. And that those pictures really changed my life. They really hardened me to a place where I could not and did not want to come back from.
Talk about that further.
Just my attitude that towards my own culture. I don't think it's a very good culture. I think we've done so many. I mean, here we are. Not just global warming is sweeping over it, but genocide, starvation, wars all over the place. We haven't gotten any better, in short. And you know, I wanted to be a critic of that culture, and I could never be part of it. You know, I could never re-enter society or anything like that. And, you know, it hardened my own militancy, which was a good thing, because the things I was really against are bad things, I think, you know. And
how did you know when you saw the Life magazine pictures a year later that you had flown over the actual massacre itself?
It was just a geography, you know. I knew the place. It was a place, you know, that I'd been right out of Duc Pho and Quang Ngai province, you know. That wasn't what did it. You know, that was a coincidence I later put together, and it just chilled me to the bone. But those pictures, I mean, there are lots of little My Lais in Vietnam. You know, we are capable of that at any time. But the scale of My Lai, and the fact that, you know, hardly anyone except pilot, you know, the warrant officer that flew the helicopter, he died.
Was it Ridenour?
No.
The pilot.
I want to say Tompkins, but that's not quite his name. Anyway, no one tried to stop it. I mean, there were people that shot themselves in the foot so they wouldn't have to, you know, wouldn't have to participate. But the scale and the fact that, you know, there were 100 GIs there, no one tried to stop it. It just, how can you, you know? And, you know, I lost my religion basically by handling too many dead children. You know, I just I couldn't believe in that kind of world. That's some.
Vietnam vet and naturalist Doug Peacock, among his books, Walking It Off, A Veteran's Chronicle of War and Wilderness. We're speaking in Montana PBS. Back with him in a minute. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman as we return to my interview with naturalist, adventurer, writer, and war vet Doug Peacock. I asked him what he was doing in Vietnam.
You know, they correctly perceived that I really wasn't with them anymore. I'm not a team player. But as a medic, I had, you know, I worked alone all day long. I held sick calls. I'd see a couple hundred patients a day when I was not on a combat patrol. And when I was, I spoke the language, which hardly anybody else did. And I was with Vietnamese and Montagnard peoples all day long. And, you know, they were the people, we rotated every year. We could get out of there. These people never got out of there. And it was their homes, their families, you know, and we ultimately, of course, betrayed them. You know, we ripped our little special forces operations out of there during sometime the Nixon regime, and those people, the NVA and the Viet Cong, did come in, and they lost their lives. You know, the people we befriended, that we pledged our loyalty to, and this is an old, you know, pattern of counterinsurgent warfare. You know, where you go in and try to win the hearts and minds of the peoples by giving them a few pills, and then you give them rifles to fight with, and then you ditch them. You know, what a corrupt goddamn government. And I haven't changed my mind about that since.
Was Hugh Thompson the pilot?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Hugh, what a, you know.
What did he do?
Well, he saw what was going on from his helicopter, and he went down and got between Cali and other people who were executing women and children in a ditch, put his plane down, and told his, he had a couple I think he had a couple M60 machine guns on his helicopter, and he ordered his men to get ready to, you know, he was loading the civilians on the helicopter to get them out of there, and if necessary, he would have his team, that never happened, but, you know, fire on those soldiers that were murdering civilians.
What did you think of Lieutenant Calley?
He is not worthy of, you know, he's not worthy of any consideration whatsoever. He is so typically this weak, murderous, common thing we find in our culture, in our military. I mean, you know, if I would have got the chance, I would have done him in myself.
So you come back to this country. Mm-hmm. How did you exist here?
I had a little bit of money from the war. It's kind of blood money because, you know, I was on a lot of operations where you got special pay. Perhaps we were in Laos. I could never prove that. But anyway, I had a big check. Now, a big check in those days was like $4,000 or $5,000. Just came in the mail. Beats me. No one ever explained it. But in those days, I could live for a couple of years off that kind of money because I camped out the whole time. I didn't live in houses. And, I was a real fringe, member of human society. I mean, for a couple of years after Vietnam, my conversation with other people was pretty much limited to give me a beer and fill her up, And I avoided women for a couple of years too. Anything intimate was just, I didn't want it right then. It was too much.
Can you talk more about Edward Abbey, who you were with to his dying day?
Well, Ed and I had a really